In a galaxy where advanced civilizations have conquered disease, death, and suffering through perfect genetic engineering, there exists one terrible truth: perfection has a price. When the most brilliant minds across 1,000 worlds cannot save a dying princess, the answer comes from the most unlikely source: a species so young, so flawed, and so beautifully broken that they still carry within their blood the very thing the galaxy has forgotten. Sometimes salvation doesn't come from strength. Sometimes it comes from embracing what makes us human. This is the story of how our imperfections became our greatest strength, and how one human's simple act of compassion changed the course of galactic history forever. The medical bay aboard the ethereal crown fell silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems that were slowly failing. Princess Zarathel of the Vexarian Empire lay motionless on the bioregeneration table, her normally luminescent blue skin now faded to an ashen gray. The intricate silver patterns that naturally adorned her face, marking her royal bloodline, flickered weakly like dying stars. Dr. Kethvar, the Empire's most renowned physician, stepped back from the diagnostic array with trembling hands. The holographic displays showed readings that defied everything he knew about Vexarian biology. After 3 centuries of practicing medicine, he had never encountered anything like this. "My lord," he whispered to Emperor Zethran, who stood watching from the observation deck. "The cellular decay is unlike anything in our medical archives. Her genetic structure is unraveling." The Emperor's massive frame tensed, his 4 arms clenched into fists. Like all Vexarians, he stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled hide a deep emerald that reflected his noble status. But now, those usually brilliant golden eyes were dim with anguish as he watched his only daughter slowly fade away. "Impossible," he growled, his voice carrying the authority of someone who ruled over 47 star systems. "The Vexarian genome has been perfected for millennia. We eliminated all genetic weaknesses, all diseases, all imperfections. How can she be dying from something that should not exist?" Dr. Kethvar's secondary arms worked frantically over his data tablets while his primary hands continued the examination. "The symptoms began 3 cycles ago, my lord. What appeared to be simple fatigue has progressed to complete cellular breakdown. Her immune system is not just failing, it's attacking her own body. Every treatment we've attempted has only accelerated the process. Through the reinforced transparent steel walls, the vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, dotted with the lights of the Vexarian fleet. 50 of the Empire's most advanced medical vessels had answered the Emperor's call, bringing the greatest minds in the galaxy to save his daughter. Kethvar had assembled specialists from across known space, the crystalline healers of Andromel, whose bodies were living repositories of medical knowledge, the shape-shifting physicians of the Morph Collective, who could literally become the diseases they fought, and even representatives from the ancient Sage Order, whose mental powers could repair damage at the molecular level. None of them had answers. "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Vexani, a crystalline healer whose diamond-like form sparkled with internal light. "This is connected to her recent diplomatic mission to the frontier worlds. She may have been exposed to some unknown pathogen." Emperor Zethran's eyes flashed dangerously. The frontier worlds were fully sterilized before her arrival. Every precaution was taken. The princess's security detail followed containment protocols that have protected our bloodline for 1,000 years. "My lord," interrupted Captain Mordek from the communication station, "we've received responses from the last of our consultation requests. The Etherian Council, the bioarchitects of Nexus Prime, and even the time healers of Chronos Station, they all report the same conclusion. Princess Zarathel's condition is beyond their understanding." The room fell into a heavy silence. In a galaxy where death from disease had been eradicated centuries ago, where beings regularly lived for millennia, and where medical science could regrow entire organs in minutes, the admission of helplessness was almost unthinkable. Dr. Kethvar turned back to his patient, his diagnostic equipment humming as it took another series of readings. "My lord, there's one possibility we have not yet explored. The decay pattern shows characteristics that are familiar, yet impossible. Explain. The cellular breakdown resembles what we might expect from extreme old age, but compressed into an impossibly short time frame. It's as if her body has forgotten how to maintain itself, as if the very programming that keeps Vexarian cells functioning has been erased. Princess Zarathel stirred slightly on the table, her eyes fluttering open. Unlike her father's golden orbs, hers were a brilliant violet, a rare trait that marked her as potentially the most powerful Vexarian psionicist of her generation. But now those eyes were clouded with pain. "Father," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the translation matrix. "I can feel it spreading. It's like ice in my veins, but burning at the same time. I can't hold on much longer." The Emperor moved to her side, his massive hand gently covering her much smaller one. Despite the difference in their size, her delicate features held the same regal bearing that had made the Vexarian bloodline legendary across the galaxy. "You will recover, my star daughter," he said, using the ancient Vexarian term of endearment. "I have summoned every healer, every scientist, every miracle worker in known space. We will find a cure." Zarathel managed a weak smile. "Always so certain, father. But I've been studying the reports. This isn't just a disease, is it? It's something else. Something that shouldn't exist in our perfectly ordered universe." Dr. Kethvar exchanged glances with his colleagues. The princess was right, of course. Her condition violated everything they understood about biology, physics, and medicine. In their perfectly engineered galaxy, where every species had optimized their genetics and eliminated all weaknesses, such a condition was not just rare. It was theoretically impossible. "My lord," came another voice from the communication array. This time, it was Lieutenant Yextal, the ship's intelligence officer. "We received an unusual message. It's from the recently contacted human settlement in the Sol system." The Emperor's expression darkened. Humanity was one of the youngest species to achieve interstellar travel, barely 3 centuries old compared to the ancient civilizations that dominated the galaxy. They were viewed by most advanced races as primitive, chaotic, and remarkably short-lived. "The humans?" Captain Mordek scoffed. "My lord, surely we're not so desperate as to seek help from species that hasn't even learned to extend their own lifespans beyond a single century." "What do they want?" the Emperor asked, ignoring his captain's dismissal. "Lieutenant Jextal Hesetatif. They're offering medical assistance, my lord. Apparently, their monitoring stations detected our medical emergency broadcasts. Their representative claims they might have insight into the princess's condition." The medical bay erupted in disbelief. Dr. Vexani's crystalline form pulsed with indignation. Preposterous. The humans barely understand their own primitive biology. What could they possibly offer that the combined medical knowledge of the galaxy cannot provide? But Emperor Zethran was quiet, his golden eyes distant. He had encountered humans before, during the recent expansion into their region of space. They were indeed young and technologically inferior, but there had been something about them that intrigued him. Unlike other species, humans seemed to thrive on chaos, to find strength in their imperfections. They were the only known species that refused genetic optimization, choosing instead to remain what they called natural. "My lord," Dr. Kethvar said carefully, "I understand your desperation, but consulting with humans would be unprecedented. Their medical knowledge is centuries behind our own. They still struggle with diseases that we eliminated before their species learned to make fire." Princess Zarathel's hand tightened weakly around her father's. "Father, perhaps that's exactly what we need. Someone who remembers what we've forgotten." The Emperor looked down at his daughter, seeing the wisdom in her fading violet eyes. Throughout galactic history, the Vexarian Empire had prided itself on perfection, on the elimination of all weakness and chaos. But now, faced with something that defied their perfect understanding, perhaps it was time to consider a different perspective. "Lieutenant Yextal," he said finally, "transmit coordinates for a secure medical bay. Tell the humans they have permission to send a representative. But make it clear, This is not an admission of equality. We're simply exploring all possible options. My lord, Captain Mordek protested. Allowing primitive aliens aboard our flagship during a medical emergency violates dozens of security protocols. My daughter is dying, the Emperor replied, his voice carrying a finality that silenced all opposition. I will not let protocol stand in the way of even the smallest possibility of saving her. As the communication array crackled to life, transmitting the unprecedented invitation across the void of space toward the small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, none of those present could have imagined how this decision would change everything they thought they knew about strength, weakness, and what it truly meant to be alive. In her fading consciousness, Princess Zarathel smiled slightly. She had always been curious about the young species that called themselves human. Soon, she would learn firsthand what made them so different from every other race in the galaxy. 3 hours later, as Princess Zarathel slipped deeper into unconsciousness despite all their efforts, a small, unremarkable human shuttle approached the massive Vexarian flagship. Inside, a single human prepared to challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about medicine, perfection, and the strange power that could be found in embracing one's flaws. The greatest medical minds in the galaxy had failed. Now it was time to see what the youngest, most chaotic species in known space could offer to save a dying princess. Dr. Sarah Chun stepped out of the human shuttle into an airlock that could have housed a small building. Everything around her was designed for beings twice her size, from the towering corridors to the massive control interfaces that she could barely reach. But Sarah had spent her entire career being underestimated because of her size, her species, and her unconventional approach to medicine. At barely 5 feet tall, with graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, she looked utterly insignificant against the backdrop of the most advanced medical vessel in the Vexarian fleet. Her medical kit was a battered leather bag that had belonged to her grandfather, a country doctor on Earth who had believed in the power of observation and intuition over technology. The Vexarian escort that met her towered above like living monuments, their scaled skin gleaming under the ship's bioluminescent lighting. Captain Mordek led the group, his 4 arms crossed in a gesture that clearly communicated his displeasure with this unprecedented situation. Dr. Chun, he said, the translation matrix making his voice sound mechanical and cold, I am Captain Mordek. I want to be absolutely clear about your status here. You are a guest, nothing more. Our medical staff will observe your consultation, but any actual treatment decisions will remain with qualified personnel. Sarah nodded calmly, accustomed to such skepticism. I understand completely, Captain. I'm just here to offer a different perspective. Sometimes the answer isn't more technology or more advanced techniques. Sometimes it's simpler than we think. The captain's golden eyes narrowed. Simple? Dr. Chun, you're about to enter a medical bay where the greatest minds in the galaxy have been working around the chronometer for days. Our equipment can analyze matter at the subatomic level, rebuild tissue from genetic templates, and manipulate biological processes that your species hasn't even discovered yet. What could possibly be simple about this situation? As they walked through corridors lined with diagnostic equipment that hummed with power beyond Earth's entire electrical grid, Sarah observed everything with the trained eye of someone who had learned medicine in field hospitals and rural clinics. While the Vexarians focused on the technological marvels surrounding them, she noticed other things, the subtle stress patterns in the crew's postures, the way their bioluminescent skin patterns flickered with anxiety, and, most importantly, the faint scent in the air that reminded her of something from her earliest medical training. Tell me about the princess, she said as they walked. Not her medical readings. Tell me about her as a person. Her personality, her habits, her interests. Dr. Kethvar, who had joined their escort, seemed puzzled by the question. I fail to see how personal characteristics relate to a cellular breakdown condition, Dr. Chun. This is a medical emergency, not a psychological consultation. Humor me, Sarah replied. In human medicine, we've learned that the person and the condition are often more connected than we initially realize. Captain Mordek's expression suggested he thought this was primitive nonsense, but he answered anyway. Princess Zarathel is unique among our people. She has always been fascinated by other species, other ways of thinking. Against royal protocol, she insisted on personally leading diplomatic missions to newly contacted worlds. She wanted to understand diversity rather than simply catalog it. She's stubborn, added Dr. Kethvar with what might have been fondness. Brilliant but stubborn. She refused the traditional royal education in favor of studying xenobiology and interspecies psychology. Her father indulged these interests because her psionic abilities made her invaluable for diplomatic work. Sarah processed this information as they approached the medical bay. So, she's someone who embraces differences rather than trying to eliminate them? An unusual trait among our people, Captain Mordek admitted. Most Vexarians view diversity as inefficiency. We have spent millennia perfecting our biology, our society, our technology. Chaos and variation are generally seen as problems to be solved. The medical bay doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing a space that took Sarah's breath away. The chamber was the size of an aircraft hangar, filled with diagnostic equipment that seemed to blend technology and art. Holographic displays showed three-dimensional models of alien biology in stunning detail, while bioregeneration tanks hummed with the power to rebuild entire organs. But Sarah's attention immediately focused on the small figure lying on the central treatment table. Princess Zarathel looked tiny and fragile despite being nearly 7 feet tall. Her blue skin had faded to an alarming gray, and the silver patterns that marked her royal heritage flickered weakly like failing neon signs. Emperor Zethran stood beside his daughter, his massive form radiating protective fury. When he turned to look at Sarah, she felt the weight of ancient authority and desperate love. Here was a father watching his child die, and neither his power nor his empire's technology could save her. "Dr. Chun," he said, his deep voice heavy with controlled emotion. "I'll be direct. Every expert in the galaxy has declared my daughter's condition impossible and untreatable. Her cellular structure is breaking down at an accelerating rate, and nothing we do slows the process. If you cannot help her, she will be dead within 2 days." Sarah approached the treatment table slowly, her human eyes taking in details that the sophisticated sensors might miss. She had learned long ago to look beyond the obvious, to see patterns that technology couldn't detect. "May I examine her directly?" she asked. "Without the diagnostic interface, just my hands and eyes." The medical staff exchanged horrified glances. Dr. Vexani's crystalline form pulsed with indignation. "Absolutely not. Manual examination is primitive and potentially harmful. Our bioscanners can provide detailed analysis down to the molecular level without any risk of contamination or damage." "With respect," Sarah said gently, "your molecular level analysis hasn't found the answer. Sometimes you need to step back and look at the bigger picture." Emperor Zethran studied the small human for a long moment. Despite her insignificant appearance, there was something in her steady gaze that reminded him of his daughter's determination to find truth in unexpected places. "Dr. Chun," he said finally, "you may proceed. But understand that if you cause any harm to my daughter, no force in the galaxy will protect you." Sarah nodded and approached Princess Zarathel. As she got closer, that familiar scent became stronger, triggering memories from her medical school days. She had smelled this before, in the terminal wards where patients face conditions that modern medicine couldn't cure. Gently, she placed her hands on the princess's forehead. The Vexarian skin was surprisingly warm, and Sarah could feel a faint pulse beneath her palms. But there was something else, a subtle vibration, almost like a frequency that was slightly off tune. "Her biorhythms," Sarah murmured, more to herself than to the watching aliens. "They're not just failing, they're fighting something." She moved her hands to the princess's wrists, feeling for pulse points that might not exist in Vexarian anatomy. The medical staff watched in fascination as this primitive human used diagnostic techniques that predated their civilization. Dr. Kethvar, Sarah said suddenly, show me her genetic scans from before she became ill. Not the current readings. The baseline from her last routine medical examination. The holographic display shifted, showing a complex, three-dimensional model of Vexarian DNA. Sarah studied it carefully, her human eyes picking out patterns that the alien physicians might have dismissed as insignificant. There, she said, pointing to a specific genetic sequence. That section, it's been modified, hasn't it? Optimized for something? Dr. Kethvar looked puzzled. Of course, like all modern Vexarians, the princess's genome was perfected at birth. Genetic weaknesses were eliminated, longevity was enhanced, disease resistance was maximized. Standard procedure for the past 3 millennia. Sarah nodded slowly, pieces of a puzzle beginning to fall into place. And this optimization, it removed all the genetic sequences associated with aging, death, and cellular breakdown. Naturally, why would we want to retain genes for such harmful processes? Because, Sarah said quietly, those same genes might be responsible for other things too. In human medicine, we've learned that biology is incredibly interconnected. When you remove one function, you might accidentally remove others that depend on the same genetic pathways. She turned back to Princess Zarathel, placing her hands over the alien's heart. The organ beat with a rhythm that seemed slightly too fast, too regular, like a machine running at maximum efficiency without the natural variations that characterized healthy biological systems. Tell me about her recent activities, Sarah said. Specifically, her diplomatic missions. Was she exposed to any species or environments that might have challenged her immune system in new ways? Captain Mordeck consulted his data tablet. Her last mission was to the Andromel system, working with refugee populations from the Outer Rim Wars. She insisted on direct contact with dozens of species, many of which carry pathogens that would be harmless to them, but potentially dangerous to other biology. And her immune system handled all of that perfectly, Dr. Kethvar confirmed. Her genetic modifications include broad-spectrum pathogen resistance. She should have been immune to anything those species could carry. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, her hands moving over the princess's body, feeling for subtle signs that the sophisticated medical equipment couldn't detect. Finally, she stood back with an expression of growing understanding. I need to ask you something that might sound strange, she said to the assembled medical team. In your optimization process, when you eliminated aging and death, did you also eliminate the biological mechanisms for adaptation and change? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the advanced species believed about perfection and improvement. Dr. Vexani's crystalline form flickered with confusion. Adaptation is inefficiency. Change introduces variables that can lead to weakness. Our genetic optimization eliminated such chaos in favor of stable, perfect function. But adaptation isn't just about surviving external threats, Sarah explained, her voice growing more confident as her theory solidified. It's also about internal balance. In humans, our imperfect biology includes mechanisms that allow our bodies to constantly adjust, to find new equilibriums when faced with challenges. We age and die, yes, but we also have incredible resilience because our systems are always adapting. She gestured to Princess Zarathel. I think your daughter's body encountered something on her diplomatic missions. Not a pathogen, but a biological challenge that required adaptation. Her optimized genetics couldn't respond because those pathways were removed. So instead of adapting, her cellular structure began breaking down. Emperor Zethran leaned forward, his golden eyes intense. You're suggesting that our genetic perfection is killing my daughter? I'm suggesting that perfection might not be as perfect as we think, Sarah replied. Princess Zarathel's condition isn't a disease. It's her body's attempt to adapt when it doesn't have the genetic tools to do so. The breakdown isn't random. It's her biology trying to rebuild itself, but lacking the fundamental mechanisms to succeed. The implications of her words rippled through the medical bay like shockwaves. If Sarah was right, then centuries of genetic optimization had eliminated not just weaknesses, but The very flexibility that allowed life to persist in an ever-changing universe. Even if your theory is correct, Dr. Kethvar said slowly, how does that help us? We cannot restore genetic sequences that have been eliminated for thousands of generations. The damage to our genome would be irreversible. Sarah smiled for the first time since boarding the ship. That's where being primitive and chaotic might actually be an advantage. You see, humans never eliminated those genetic pathways. We still carry all the messy, inefficient, beautifully adaptive mechanisms that evolution gave us. And sometimes, biology has ways of sharing solutions between species that science hasn't fully understood yet. She opened her battered medical bag and withdrew a device that looked impossibly crude compared to the sophisticated equipment surrounding them. A simple blood analysis kit that could have come from a field hospital. I'd like to propose an experiment, she said. But it's going to require you to trust in something that your perfect sciences might consider impossible. As Princess Zarathel stirred weakly on the treatment table, her violet eyes opening to focus on the small human who claimed to hold the key to her survival, the greatest medical minds in the galaxy prepared to witness something unprecedented. The power of embracing imperfection in a universe obsessed with perfection. The silence in the medical bay was broken only by the steady rhythm of monitoring equipment and Princess Zarathel's increasingly labored breathing. Sarah Chun stood at the center of the galaxy's most advanced medical facility, holding a device that looked like a relic from a primitive museum. Dr. Chun, Emperor Zethran said carefully, you speak of an experiment. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah set her simple blood analysis kit on the diagnostic table beside billions of credits worth of sophisticated equipment. Before I explain, I need you to understand something about human biology that might seem disturbing to species that have achieved genetic perfection. She activated her small device, and a holographic display appeared, crude by Vexarian standards, but functional. This is a sample of my blood, taken this morning. Watch what happens when I introduce a mild stressor. The display showed human blood cells under magnification. Sarah added a drop of something to the sample, and immediately the cellular activity changed. The blood cells began moving differently, some clustering together, others releasing chemical signals, the entire sample transforming in real time. What you're seeing, Sarah explained, is adaptation happening at the cellular level. Human blood isn't just a transport medium. It's a living system that responds to challenges, learns from them, and develops new strategies to survive. Dr. Kethvar leaned forward, his secondary arms working frantically over his data analysis tools. Extraordinary. Your cellular structures are in constant flux. How do you maintain biological stability with such chaos? We don't maintain stability, Sarah said with a smile. We maintain adaptability. Our bodies are always changing, always responding, always learning. It's messy and inefficient, but it means we can survive things that would destroy a more rigid system. Princess Zarathel stirred on the treatment table, her voice barely a whisper. You're saying our perfection made us fragile? Sarah approached the princess gently. Not fragile, specialized. Your biology is incredibly efficient at what it was designed to do. But when it encounters something outside those parameters, it doesn't have the tools to adapt. She turned to address the assembled medical team. I believe Princess Zarathel's cellular breakdown is her body's attempt to regain adaptability. The diplomatic missions exposed her to biological information, not pathogens, but genetic signatures and cellular patterns from dozens of species. Her optimized biology tried to process this information, but couldn't adapt to incorporate it. So instead, it's trying to deconstruct itself to rebuild with more flexibility. Dr. Vexani's crystalline form pulsed with skepticism. Even if that were true, how could we possibly help her? We cannot undo millennia of genetic optimization. No, Sarah agreed, but we might be able to supplement it. She held up a small vial filled with what looked like ordinary human blood. This contains something that Vexarian biology eliminated long ago, adaptive stem cells. Not just any adaptive cells, but ones that have been exposed to the same species diversity that the princess encountered on her missions. The medical bay erupted in shocked voices. Captain Mordeck stepped forward, his forearms spread in a defensive posture. You're suggesting introducing primitive human genetic material into the princess's bloodstream? That's not medicine. That's contamination. Is it? Sarah asked calmly. Or is it transfusion? In human medicine, we regularly transfer blood between individuals to save lives. The process works because our blood carries information, not just nutrients and oxygen, but adaptive capabilities. Emperor Zethran studied the small vial, as if it contained either salvation or destruction for his daughter. Dr. Chun, even if such a procedure were possible, wouldn't human blood be toxic to Vexarian biology? Sarah shook her head. That's the beautiful thing about adaptive systems. They don't try to impose their own structure. They teach other systems how to adapt. Think of it as providing a template rather than a replacement. She moved to Princess Zarathel's side and gently took the alien's hand. Your Highness, I need your consent for this. The process would involve introducing human adaptive factors into your bloodstream. Your body would use them as a guide to rebuild its own adaptation mechanisms. It's not about becoming human. It's about remembering how to change. Princess Zarathel's violet eyes focused on Sarah with effort. Despite her weakness, her voice carried the authority of her bloodline. Dr. Chun, in all our diplomatic contacts, humans have been unique. Other species see chaos where you see possibility. Perhaps that's exactly what I need. My daughter, Emperor Zethran, said urgently, this is unprecedented. We have no data on the long-term effects, no understanding of the risks involved. Father, the princess whispered, I'm dying anyway. Our perfect medicine has failed. What do we have to lose by trying something imperfect? Dr. Kethvar stepped forward, his diagnostic equipment already analyzing Sarah's blood sample. The human's genetic material is indeed extraordinarily dynamic. The cellular structures show adaptation patterns that our biology eliminated eons ago. But the integration process, there's no way to predict the outcome. Actually, Sarah said, pulling out another device from her bag. This one looking like an ancient stethoscope modified with human engineering, there's a way to test compatibility first. She placed the device against Princess Zarathel's chest, and immediately soft, biorhythmic patterns began displaying on a small screen. This measures not just physical compatibility, but what we call biological resonance. If two living systems can learn from each other, there's usually a harmonic pattern that emerges. The patterns on her screen were chaotic at first, but gradually began to show signs of synchronization. Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise. This is remarkable. Your Highness, your biology isn't just compatible with adaptive factors. It's actively seeking them. Your body knows what it needs. How is that possible? Dr. Vexani asked, her crystalline structure flickering with rapid data processing. Vexarian genetics were optimized to eliminate such primitive response patterns. Evolution is older and wiser than our engineering, Sarah explained. You can suppress adaptive mechanisms, but the underlying biological imperative remains. Princess Zarathel's condition isn't a breakdown. It's her body trying to remember how to live. She began preparing the transfusion equipment, her movements efficient despite the unfamiliar alien technology. The process is actually quite simple. We introduce a small amount of human adaptive blood into the princess's system. Her biology will analyze the adaptive patterns and use them as a template to rebuild her own flexibility mechanisms. And the risks? Emperor Zethran demanded. The same as any medical procedure involving unknowns, Sarah admitted. But, Your Majesty, the alternative is certain death. This offers hope. Princess Zarathel managed to grip her father's massive hand. Father, I've spent my life studying other species because I believe diversity was strength. Now I have a chance to prove it. The Emperor looked around the medical bay at the assembled experts who had exhausted all their advanced solutions. Finally, his golden eyes settled on the small human who offered something none of their perfection could provide. The willingness to try something unproven because it was right. Dr. Chun, he said formally, You have my permission to proceed. But understand, if this experiment fails, if you harm my daughter in any way, you will answer to the full power of the Vexarian Empire." "Understood," Sarah nodded, then turned to Princess Zarathel. "Your Highness, this might feel strange. You're about to experience something your people eliminated long ago, the sensation of your body learning and changing in real time." As Sarah began the careful process of preparing the adaptive blood for transfusion, she explained what would happen. The human adaptive factors won't change your Vexarian genetics. Instead, they'll teach your existing biology how to be flexible again. Think of it as remembering a language you once spoke fluently. Dr. Kethvar monitored every aspect of the procedure with equipment that could detect changes at the subatomic level. "Dr. Chun, the integration is beginning. I'm seeing cellular activity patterns that haven't appeared in Vexarian biology for thousands of generations." On the monitors, Princess Zarathel's life signs began to change. Not dramatically, but with a subtle shift from the rigid patterns of optimized biology toward something more alive. Her silver facial patterns flickered more brightly, and her breathing became deeper and more natural. "How do you feel, Your Highness?" Sarah asked, monitoring the transfusion carefully. "Strange," Princess Zarathel whispered, but her voice was already stronger. "I can feel something waking up inside me. It's like static clearing from a communication channel. Things are becoming clearer." Emperor Zethran watched in amazement as his daughter's skin began to regain its natural blue luminescence. "Dr. Chun, what exactly is happening to her?" "Her biology is remembering how to adapt," Sarah explained, adjusting the transfusion rate based on the princess's responses. "The human adaptive factors are providing a template that her body is using to rebuild its own flexibility mechanisms. She's not becoming more human. She's becoming more herself." Dr. Vexani's readings showed unprecedented biological activity. The cellular regeneration is accelerating, but not randomly. The princess's body is selectively rebuilding damaged systems while maintaining her essential Vexarian characteristics. As the transfusion continued, something remarkable happened. Princess Zarathel's violet eyes began to glow with renewed power, and the silver patterns on her skin started pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to resonate with the ship's bioluminescent systems. "Father," she said, her voice carrying new strength, "I can feel the ship. I can sense the crew. My psionic abilities, they're not just returning, they're expanding." The medical team exchanged startled glances. Vexarian psionic powers were among the most advanced in the galaxy, but they had been carefully controlled and limited through genetic optimization to prevent dangerous feedback loops. "This is impossible, Dr. Kethvar breathed, watching his instruments register psionic energy levels that exceeded anything in their records. Her mental capacities are increasing beyond optimal parameters. "That's what happens when you give biology permission to exceed its programming," Sarah said with satisfaction. "Adaptation doesn't just restore function. It often discovers new possibilities." Princess Zarathel sat up on the treatment table, moving with a grace and energy that had been absent for days. But more than that, there was something different about her presence, a vitality that seemed to radiate outward, affecting everyone in the room. "Dr. Chun," she said, looking at the small human with wonder, "what you've given me isn't just life. It's the ability to grow, to change, to become more than what I was designed to be. That's the gift of imperfection, Your Highness," Sarah replied. "When you embrace your flaws and limitations, you discover that they're not weaknesses, they're potential." As Princess Zarathel stood for the first time in days, her renewed strength flowing through the medical bay like a wave of possibility, none of them could have imagined how this simple act of medical cooperation would transform not just her life, but the entire galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be truly alive. The human elixir had done more than save a dying princess. It had awakened something that had been sleeping in Vexarian biology for millennia. The power to become something greater than perfection. 3 days after the transfusion, the ethereal crown was no longer the same ship. Princess Zarathel's recovery had been remarkable enough, but what followed defied every understanding of biology, physics, and the fundamental laws that govern galactic civilization. Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the observation deck, watching through the massive transparisteel windows as something unprecedented unfolded in space around them. The Vexarian fleet, which had maintained perfect formation for decades, was now moving in patterns that seemed almost organic. Ships curved and flowed around each other like schools of fish, their usual rigid military precision replaced by something more fluid and alive. Dr. Chen, Emperor Thran's deep voice, carried a mixture of awe and concern as he joined her at the viewport. My daughter's transformation appears to be spreading. It had started small. Within hours of the transfusion, Princess Zarathel's enhanced psionic abilities had begun affecting the ship's bioluminescent systems. The corridors now pulsed with patterns of light that seemed to breathe, responding to the emotional states of the crew. But, more disturbing to the Vexarian command structure, the rigid hierarchies that had governed their society for millennia were beginning to blur. The crew members are reporting increased creativity, enhanced problem-solving abilities, and the Emperor paused, searching for words to describe something his language had never needed to express: spontaneous collaboration. They're working together in ways that bypass traditional command structures. Sarah nodded, having observed the changes herself. Vexarian society was built on precise roles, clear hierarchies, and efficient specialization. But now, crew members were stepping outside their assigned functions, offering insights from unexpected perspectives, and forming working relationships that transcended rank and department. Your Majesty, she said carefully, this might be exactly what Princess Zarathel needed to fully recover. Adaptation isn't something that happens in isolation. It's a community process. From across the observation deck came Captain Mordek's voice, but it lacked its usual authoritative certainty. Dr. Chun, we need to discuss the complications arising from your treatment. Sarah turned to see not just the captain, but Dr. Kethvar, Dr. Vexani, and several other senior officers approaching. What struck her immediately was how different they looked. The rigid postures and formal spacing that had characterized Vexarian interactions were gone, replaced by something more natural and collaborative. Captain, Sarah replied, what kind of complications? Dr. Kethvar stepped forward, his forearms gesturing with an animation that would have been considered improper days earlier. Dr. Chun, the princess's adaptive biology is creating a field effect. Her enhanced psionic abilities are transmitting adaptation patterns to other Vexarians through quantum entanglement at the neural level. In simpler terms, Dr. Vexani added, her crystalline form pulsing with colors that Sarah had never seen before. Princess Zarathel is teaching our biology how to be flexible just by being near us. The entire fleet is beginning to develop adaptive capabilities. Sarah felt a chill of realization. How many people are affected? At last count, Captain Mordek said, approximately 40,000 crew members across the fleet are showing signs of biological and cognitive adaptation. The effect appears to be exponential. Before Sarah could respond, Princess Zarathel's voice filled the observation deck as she entered with an energy that seemed to light up the space around her. Dr. Chun, you have to see what's happening in the lower decks. The engineering crews have started modifying our propulsion systems in ways that our best theoretical physicists said were impossible. The princess looked radiant, her blue skin glowing with health, and her violet eyes blazing with power and joy. But there was something else about her now, a presence that seemed to affect reality itself. As she moved through the space, even the ship's gravitational systems seemed to respond to her, creating subtle variations in local physics that allowed for more fluid movement. Your Highness, Emperor Zethran said with parental concern, perhaps you should rest. Your recovery has been remarkable, but we don't want to strain your systems. Princess Zarathel laughed, a sound like crystal bells that somehow harmonized with the ship's bioluminescent pulse patterns. Father, I've never felt better in my life. But, more than that, I'm finally understanding what the galaxy could be if we weren't so afraid of change. She gestured toward the viewport, where the fleet continued its organic dance through space. Look at our ships. They're not just following orders anymore. They're collaborating, creating, finding new ways to move through space that are more efficient than anything our engineers designed. Dr. Kethvar consulted his data tablets. Though Sarah noticed, he seemed to be intuiting as much information as he was reading from the instruments. The modifications to our propulsion systems have increased efficiency by 37% while reducing energy consumption. The crews are essentially redesigning our technology through collaborative intuition. That's impossible, Captain Mordek protested, though his voice lacked conviction. Such modifications would require years of testing and theoretical modeling. Not if you have thousands of minds working together through adaptive neural networks, Princess Zarathel explained. Dr. Chin's transfusion didn't just restore my ability to adapt. It awakened something that's been dormant in Vexarian biology for millennia. We used to be a collaborative species before we optimized ourselves into isolation. Sarah felt the weight of unintended consequences settling on her shoulders. Your Highness, while this is fascinating, we need to consider the implications. If the adaptation effect continues to spread, it will reach the entire Vexarian Empire. Emperor Zethran finished grimly. 47 star systems, trillions of citizens, all of whom have lived for centuries in a perfectly ordered society. If they all begin developing adaptive capabilities simultaneously, the implications hung in the air like a storm front. Galactic civilization was built on predictability, on species maintaining their defined characteristics and limitations. If one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy suddenly became unpredictably adaptive, it could destabilize the entire political and social order. My lord, Lieutenant Yextal's voice came over the communication system with unusual urgency. We're receiving priority transmissions from the Galactic Council. They're demanding explanations for the unusual behavior of our fleet. Princess Zarathel moved to the communication console with a grace that seemed to bend space around her. Put them through. It's time the galaxy learned what we've discovered. The holographic display activated, showing the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council, ancient beings from species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. Their expressions ranged from concern to outright alarm. Emperor Zethran spoke Counselor Vexthon of the Etherian Collective, his energy-based form flickering with agitation. Our monitoring stations report unprecedented behavior from your fleet. Your ships are operating outside established physics parameters, and our telepathic contacts report unusual mental emanations from your vessels. Furthermore, added Counselor Morgeth of the Silicon Brotherhood, her geometric form reshaping itself with what could only be described as anxiety. Our social stability algorithms indicate that the changes in your empire could cascade across the galaxy if left unchecked. Adaptation and change are antithetical to the order we've maintained for 10,000 years. Emperor Zethran looked to his daughter, who stepped forward to address the council with a confidence that radiated through the quantum communication link. Honored counselors, Princess Zarathel began, what you're observing isn't a threat to galactic order. It's an evolution beyond it. For millennia, we've all sought perfection through elimination of chaos, weakness, and change. But perfection is static, and static systems eventually die. Her violet eyes blazed with power as her words resonated through the communication array. Dr. Chin's human medicine didn't just save my life. It reminded us that strength comes not from eliminating weakness, but from learning to dance with it. Counselor Vexthon's form pulsed with alarm. Princess, what you describe sounds dangerously close to the philosophical chaos that destroyed the ancient civilizations. We evolved beyond such primitive thinking. Did we evolve? Princess Zarathel asked, her voice carrying a new authority that seemed to touch something deep in each council member. Or did we just become very sophisticated at avoiding growth? Dr. Sarah Chan watched the exchange with growing understanding of what she had unknowingly set in motion. The human elixir hadn't just saved Princess Zarathel, It had awakened something in Vexarian biology that was now spreading like a virus of possibility through their entire civilization. "Your Highness," she said quietly, "I think we need to talk about what happens next. Because if this adaptation effect reaches other species..." Princess Zarathel turned to her with a smile that seemed to contain entire galaxies of possibility. "Dr. Chun, I think you've given us something even more precious than life. You've given us the ability to grow beyond what we ever imagined we could become." As the Galactic Council continued their alarmed discussions, and the Vexarian fleet danced through space in patterns that defied conventional physics, Sarah realized that her simple act of medical compassion had become something far greater, the first step in the transformation of an entire galaxy. The human elixir had saved a dying princess, but its true power was just beginning to unfold across the stars.